8. I already have 1 paramedic.
So this goes back to the proposal we talked about last year. Where
Yes.
You hire 4, and then we train existing people to the next level.
The next level.
So, did we talk about phasing this in as another option?
Well,
where the training could
I looked at phasing this in as a 2-year package. Adding the 4 new personnel would be this coming budget year. Remember, every year we hire one guy. It costs us $36,000 to send them to school. If we bring in the 4 new personnel, we can send those personnel this year to school.
yeah, and it doesn't impact anything.
Doesn't impact us.
Because we haven't implemented the overall change in the shift structure.
And at the same time, we could start getting the other members into school, because the 12-week program that the new personnel would be going to the Mass Fire Academy, and at the same time there'd be the 3 members that would be going to ALS school. So while those people were in school, the other people wouldn't be.
Members would be
filling the holes for them.
Would be incurring additional overtime.
Right. I'm sorry? We would not.
Would not.
Would not.
And after
And at the
everyone
end,
was trained, then we'd shift into the implement of the
5-man shift
amount in the 5-man shift.
to get the 2 in, 2 out.
We could do 5-man shifts wherever there was an additional person available that wasn't in training.
Right.
Until we get to the point where everyone's trained, and then
Exactly.
filling the shift. What about, I had suggested if we were in this mode, right, but also if we lost a man on a shift, right, would we fill that shift?
Well, we'd have to come down with the idea is if we're going to 5-man shifts, we need to keep 5-man per shift. If we're hiring 4 guys to if we're hiring 4 personnel to make a 5-man shift and drop to 4, then what have we really done?
Well,
we've added another person to the department.
How often does this occur, right, in terms of...
Personnel have vacations. Holiday time.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
It's going to be a lot.
Be a lot. Another drawback to that is that if we're working to get to the 2 in, 2 out.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we drop back, then we fall back to where we are today. We're not getting the 2 in, 2
Well, we
out.
don't, yeah, I understand, but the issue is affordability and how you make a transition over time, okay?
Right.
So the question is...
And this is how I looked at this here. If we could transition this next year, possibility, and then bring them on board and keep the 5-man shifts the following year, or the year after.
Well, getting back to the chairman's point here as far as affordability, I've probably been one of the small ones to come around to this whole way of thinking over the years, but I think there needs to be some sort of understanding and compromise if we're going to ease into this program. I don't consider a 2-year period to be a median time period. I think the acclimation is probably longer than that. And again, we've talked about this before. If we're actually going to get control of the overtime budget, 4 new personnel isn't going to do it either.
Right.
We only need 8 people. You're not going to save a dime, but you're going to have enhanced coverage. You're going to then have your 2 in, 2 out coverage. Talk about additional revenue sources to help supplement the budgetary process for the ALS. So on and so forth. We've had these conversations over the years. But I just think if we're going to get into this program at all, I think that's to get a pretty clear understanding that it's not a 2-year transition period.
It's a 2-year transition period to do to the beginning of the stage. And what you want to do to go to the next one would be to come back the following year for 4 more people.
I think Steve is going beyond that from the point of view of saying, if we look at affordability in terms of selling this to the community, in terms of getting support for it, and to be able to implement it, right? It's going to be necessary in the process to reduce some of the overtime budget. To get to the point where you have 8 people, 8 staff members, and then, you know, clearly you can maintain the reduced overtime budget.
Right.
Because you can afford to have one less person on the shift when you're dealing with your standard vacation days, sick leave, or whatever.
But that only comes in the, like you say, hiring 8 people. That's where that would come in.
We're not gonna get all that in one fell swoop. And I think it's important to understand that, you know, the two things, affordability and making sure the public's gonna support it, and the other
Right.
one is obviously the safety of the firefighters, the 2 in, 2 out, which is the goal. Again, in order to achieve that goal, I don't think we're going to be able to get that as soon as we'd like to see it, which was yesterday,
Right.
from an affordability standpoint. I mean, all the arguments make sense, but it's from an affordability standpoint, a prioritization standpoint, in relation to the entire overall budget perspective, how can we get to this point? And I think we're looking at several budget cycles in order to get there. I don't want to see us getting to a minimum manning level, mandated minimum manning level of 5 per shift. And you can't get beyond 4. You have to have 4 as a minimum anyway right now
Right.
to operate. But I can't.
But along with the 4 personnel and the other 3 personnel going to school, comes a change in the operation, a better service for the community. Becomes ALS trained, not EMT. On that, also in that vein, comes in more revenue. Our opportunity to charge more for the service that we provide.
I still haven't seen a whole spreadsheet, which we've been asking for from the previous acting chief and the chief before him, and we haven't really seen a good analysis as to what we really think is the revenue stream going to be. But that's fine. To me, it doesn't have to be a break-even point of view, because I agree that there's an enhanced benefit to it. And there's going to be a cost to that. The cost might be incrementally smaller because, again, you're using the same number of personnel or a few more to increase the level of service, to get increase the revenue stream.
Right.
But to get to, my concern is, meeting the community, whether the board here, whether it be through the bargaining process or possibly through the budgetary process, a minimum manning level of 5 right now. And I don't see that, I can't see ourselves committing to that in a 2-year process, or even 3, because we need more personnel in order to get to that. If we eventually get 6 or 8 more people on, then it's gonna happen anyway.
Right.
But to mandate it, and to collectively agree to it through the collective bargaining process, I think it's too costly at this particular point in time. I'd rather have the flexibility to manage 5 level when we can afford to, and if we have to run 4, as we've been doing for years, do it. At the same time, start implementing some of these programs that you're talking about as far as the ALS. That's a step for me.
Well, we've been running this manpower since 1967. I went back and did some charts and so forth out of. From 1966, they changed over to a new system. They went from 56 hours to 48. In 1966, they dropped over to 42 hours, which we are presently now. That brought the manpower to 3 personnel per shift with an officer and the fire chief and a deputy. In 1974, my father, who was also the fire chief many years ago in 74, wrote a fire analysis, and at that time there was 13 members of a permanent firefighter side. They had an extra guy, they had a floater. And in 1991, when that gentleman left the department, which was Chief Jack Powell at the time, he was Captain Jack Powell at the time, he left in 1991, we dropped back to our present level of 12 personnel, which is 4 guys, 16 guys. Got a 13-man permanent firefighter force, dropped to 12 firefighter force. And that's where we sit right now. The program that we hired, the municipal people that come in and do the benchmarking and also the fire study, came back with the same analysis that we had in 1974, that we needed an unmanned fire station on the west side of town and at least 5 people per shift. That goes back to 1967.
I'm not disagreeing with anything
I
you
don't
said.
think
How much
anybody,
longer does it take to implement it?
I don't think anybody on this board, right,
Yep.
refutes any of this. The issue
Okay.
is, how do we get there, right? And, you know, bottom line is, we don't have the funds
To do it.
to do it. So we're trying to find some ways of getting there in incremental steps along the way, right? So I guess my view is that if we brought on 4 people and we continue to run 4 shifts when the 5th person isn't available,
Mhm.
right? To reduce the overtime issue helps us to ease the program in. And that isn't gonna happen, as Steve mentioned, in a 2-year period. It's gonna take longer to get there. But if we don't do something, we'll be talking about this next year and the year
Right.
after and the year after. I had asked another question before your administration that I never got an answer to, and it was just alluded to. And that is that currently we have ALS through an outside vendor.
Yep.
Right, which means that we don't get the rapid response that we would get internally because we never know where that ambulance is gonna be. But I had asked the question of how many ALS calls does this vendor get, and what are the, what's the revenue generated from that? We should be able to get to that, I would think.
I could have it if I was in my office. I have it on the wall.
Well,
But
at
answer
some
to the-
point, I didn't expect an answer now to the question, but it is a question I have asked and no one has come up with the answer. And I think that would be a valuable piece to answer some of the questions the board has had associated with, revenue estimates. At least that's something that's real, right?
We get 200 per ALS call.
No, I mean, how many calls do they?
I thought it was around 33 to 35% of our ambulance calls are ALS.
I mean,
Yeah, I've heard that number, but we,
I can give you the hard
if that's the case,
fact.
there's gotta be a public, there's gotta be a record of it
We have it.
somewhere, and based on those calls, what would have been
We
the
have that.
revenue, what,
Sure that we can get that for you.
You can get that for you.
Shouldn't be an issue at all.
good.
First time hearing of it. Really? Wow.
Well-
I mean, I haven't been here that long.
Yeah, right, okay, well, this is not,
We'll
I'm
have
not
that
trying to
for you.
chastise anybody
Nope.
sitting here at this point, I'm saying, I've asked the question before.
And we thought it,
didn't
and
get an
truthfully,
answer.
I thought it's been answered before. So
I've
we'll
never
get that
heard the-
information
Greg,
and
have
now
we got an answer to that?
we'll get it for you right away.
No, never had an answer. Because then that helps you quantify, or helps us quantify exactly what the increased revenue stream could be, and then how that
How
could,
that
how
fits
that
in
could
with the
fit into the
funding,
budget
see?
and support what we're
Right.
looking to do.
From what I know about this is that if we take a person in our ambulance with an ALS provider, we get $200. They get the rest. If we don't, we get the full amount.
What's the rest?
Whatever it is, you can't, I don't know if you could
The ambulance-
clarify that, it's based on illness. I mean,
Hey,
I know,
depending
but
on,
ALS
From the
calls,
vendor, from
ALS
the
calls
vendor.
between $1,200 and $2,000.
My guess is the vendor should be able to provide to you, to us, what kind of revenue they've generated over the last 2 fiscal years, say, based on the calls that we've made to them. We don't pay them. No, they
pay us.
build
They
the
pay
rest-
us.
They pay
$200
us
fee.
the $200,
They collect
and then
the
they
money
collect the rest
evidently.
from the insurance company.
So that makes it harder to get at, but it would be
Very-
nice to know what that number is. Even if we take the number of calls and get some kind of an average from them, and multiply it by the number of calls, so that we get a ballpark of what that revenue number is.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
that helps put a financial plan together to fund this thing.
should we get it next week?
Again, that would go a long way in assisting us from a budgetary standpoint, anticipating revenue.
Karen?
Absolutely.